Hey everyone, so this is a video about how to correctly, or how I would correctly apply thicker full coverage cream foundations. So for instance, like MAC's Studio Sculpt foundation, or something like this Barbara Daily makeup. You know, it's quite gloppy, it's not liquid at all, it's not going to come out by itself. Or what I'm going to use here for this example would be like the Vichy Derma Blend as well. This would be another cream foundation. So they are fuller coverage. Number one, the main mistake people think or do with full coverage foundations is to apply load of it. There's no need for that because it is full coverage, and by that it usually means there's more pigment in it, so you don't need to use you don't need to use more of it than other foundations. Being full coverage, it will apply more, it will offer more coverage by just applying the right amount, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, the amount of times in work I'll see just a face of foundation walking towards me, which is not what you want at all. Now, I personally aren't the biggest fan of full coverage foundations, but that's not to say I don't wear them the odd time and that there's not a need for them. So, for instance, if you have seen my previous video to this video, you'll see that I just got a course of photo rejuvenation or IPL treatment done a couple of days ago. So my face is weird and patchy looking at the moment, and you can see that like red spot on my nose is from the freckle that came off. I was cleansing my face, being careful, but the pigmentation kind of crusts up and goes a bit funny and then comes off, so that's what was left underneath that one because that was a very dark mark. So I would personally probably want good coverage just for the time being until this calms down a bit and until everything goes. So I'll show you how I apply this. I'm just going to pop a little bit onto the back of my hand. So this is the Derma Blend, that's probably too much as well, but the Derma Blend Vichy Corrective Foundation number 15 Opal, which is the palest one. Now the brushes I generally wouldn't really use for this would be, and these are the brushes I'd always use for liquid foundation, you know, the regular duo fibre like the 187 brush. I find they're a little bit too floppy. I prefer something with a little bit more, that's a little bit more sturdy. So ones that I like would be like this, the Real Techniques one, which is, this is, I don't know, I think the buffer brush or foundation brush. Then this MAC 130, this one as well. So they're short and sturdy, they just give a lot of control, or it's not even the word I'm looking for. They're you know, they're not floppy, they're rigid. That's what I want, rigid ones. Other great ones would be these guys, which are the Sigma ones, the flat top kabuki and the other one. So those are the kind of ones. Or obviously these kind of traditional paintbrushes are great for these foundations as well. Just something that'll just push them around a little bit better, because they are, you know, they're not liquid, so they don't just blend as seamlessly as liquid foundations do. So one thing I like to do when I'm applying these kind of foundations is, you know, that trick that some people do when they're on a diet is that they'll use a smaller plate when they're eating. They feel like they're more full because they'll fill up their smaller plate and eat that all, and then, you know, they've eaten a full plate. Whereas if they eat off a big plate, they'll find that they'll eat more because there's more of it on the plate. I'm kind of like the same with that. Or I'm kind of like that when it comes to foundation brushes. If I use a bigger foundation brush, I tend to apply more foundation. That's why, I don't know if you noticed, that I tend to use my smaller duo fibre brushes more than I use my big ones, you know, like this. So I tend to use my smaller foundation brushes as well when I'm using a thicker foundation, just so that I don't use too much of it. So that's what I would advise first of all. I think that's a good idea when it comes to this is another good one as well, just a small paintbrush. So I'm going to use the Real Techniques one just for this, and you really don't need too much. I'll usually pop a little bit onto my skin first of all. Of course you can apply a primer and all that kind of stuff first if you feel like you need it. This is just for here. And then lightly buff it in. So this spreads so thick already, mightn't even need as much as what I put on. It's grand for this video. And some of these foundations tend to dry quite quickly, so you might want to work in one area and completely do that area before moving on to the next. But when it comes to this Vichy Derma Blend or like the MAC Studio Sculpt, it's fine to do it this way. And already I find that I've almost full coverage. So what I like to do is just kind of stipple over the area once I have most of it spread out, and that'll help just settle it in place, but you get the maximum coverage by doing that. And I would also make sure not to use a natural haired bristle, a natural haired brush if possible. I just find that these do tend to, it tends to like soak up a lot of the product, but it also, I find, will leave streaks in the product. I'm just going to use my finger to blend that in a little bit. And that's enough. So I didn't apply, you know, a massive amount, but I applied more than enough to give a good, decent covering. So now my face looks like it's totally even. Now, one of the things you have to consider when you are using a full coverage foundation is that it will make your face all the one tone. So it's definitely necessary to apply, like, you know, contour and highlight, and I find, if you want it to look natural. So just down the centre of my nose where I needed a little bit more coverage, I'm going to apply that with my finger and just tap it in place the way you would a concealer, because these tend to be quite thick in that you can actually use them the same way you would use a concealer. So just sit back, don't apply another full layer, there's no need for that, and that's what I see people doing when they feel like they need more coverage. You don't need that, you just need to apply a tiny bit more just where it's needed. So pick it up like you would a concealer and just pat it lightly. Just with your fingertips is fine. I find these foundations work really well with your fingertips, because sometimes they do need a little bit more warming up. Now this is assuming you want to go for full coverage with the full coverage foundation. If you wanted to go for something a little bit more medium coverage but still using a full coverage foundation, all you have to do is just use a little bit less, and I would nearly use my fingers to really blend it into the skin, and work it in. And then of course my eyes are going to look really dark because the rest of my face is so even now and light in colour, but that's pretty much, I mean, you don't really see too many of my marks left behind. And then you could always just apply a light covering of powder then over it, of course, to set it in place, and that'll give a little bit more coverage even on top of that. But the main thing to remember, I think, is not to apply a second full covering of it, because in most cases it's just not necessary. Most people will just have certain areas they might need to apply a little bit more. And if it's like a slightly bigger area, by all means you can go in with your brush again. I'd nearly not apply it straight onto the brush though, because you're in danger of having too much on it. I find if you use your finger and apply it to the area first, you've much more control over how much you apply to the skin, and then use your brush to blend it in. And also another happy side effect is that there'll be less crap on the brush to wash off, so it'll be a much easier job at the end of the day to clean your brush as well, because these thicker foundations can be a bit of a pain to clean off your bristles. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. Remember, you don't need too much of a full coverage foundation. That's the whole point of it. It's much more pigment heavy than other foundations, so you just don't need too much of it. It'll work and do its job as a full coverage foundation, just by putting it on like you would any other foundation. You know, don't need to pile it on. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks a million for watching, and I'll chat to you soon. So long, guys.